We'll be talking during the race with Alan Grice, who's not taking part in this weekend's round, nor, of course, is George Fury or Peter Brock. John Harvey driving Peter Brock's car. Peter Brock qualifying 11th, incidentally, at Silverstone for a race which we'll tell you more about. So, front row, Dick Johnson, Steve Masterton and Alan Moffat, looking left to right. Second row, John Harvey, Jim Richards. Third row, Steve Harrington, Peter McLeod, Warren Cullen. Fourth row, Gary Wilmington and Andrew Harris, as they're off on an 80-kilometre, 25-lap journey. The Falcons getting power to the ground well, but being caught by Harvey from the second row of the grid. So Johnson, Masterton, Moffat fourth, Harvey third. Moffat really swapped towards the outside of the track, and one wonders whether the front of the car washed out a bit as he got onto a slippery section of track. Murray Carter there. Warren Cullen didn't get away too well. Andrew Harris, his teammate, to the inside of him, but behind. Then John English. This is the front of the field, though. Johnson getting away well. Harvey, Masterton, Peter McLeod, Moffat, Jim Richards, Harrington. Johnson and the locals love it. The Queenslander in the lead.
Moffat has a problem, I think.
Alan Grice, what do you see the situation with Moffat?
Well, he's been falling back during just the first one half of a lap, and that's fairly uncharacteristic. His car should be good in these greasy conditions, but he's fallen back another 2 places in half a lap.
It's very wet over the back, Alan.
Yes, it is, but it's wet for all of them, and it shouldn't be of much concern. Masterton is also having a problem. He lost a position to John Harvey under the bridge, and he lost a position then to...
in fact, he's lost 2. He's now back behind Alan Moffat as well.
Yeah, he's sliding around more.
Dick leads John Harvey by 1.3 seconds.
3.88 seconds back to Steve Masterton.
This is a fascinating start because of the greasy condition. The car that's best suited to the condition is moving away very quickly. You know, that's unusual to see Dick just pull out like that, and Johnny Harvey, with his experience, is going with him. But the potential front runners, the ones we imagine be there, just aren't at the moment. I think, though, that will change because there'll be a very quickly a drying line. There are that many motor cars out there. The circuit will dry off.
John Harvey very determined in this motor car this weekend.
Masterton's pulled over to the left of the circuit. He's still on the circuit, but he's lost another position. I'm quite certain he's got a problem.
1:27.4 the opening lap for Johnson. A standing start. Lap record 1 minute 15, held by Peter Brock and Alan Moffat.
Set last year. And Dick Johnson very sideways onto the straight. Peter McLeod closes slightly on
Yes,
John
to judge
Harvey.
a Mazda performance, have a look at the way Peter McLeod is going. A 20.98 that time for Johnson. Behind McLeod, it's Jim Richards, Alan Moffat. Quite a gap back to Masterton, who's not going nearly as well as he qualified. Steve Harrington, Murray Carter, Cullen going down inside Wilmington. Then Andrew Harris, John English and Graham Lusty.
Johnson's been at the circuit since Monday. He's taken 6 weeks of heavy development since the third round of the series at Wanneroo. This is his home track. He has not been a happy man during the week. The car has not been performing as well as he would have liked it.
Johnson 2 seconds and a third in the first 3 rounds of the championship. 66 points to Brock's 73. Moffat's 45 in third place. McLeod 34 in fourth.
We're seeing a very good drive from Dick in these conditions. He's been complaining about the handling of his car, but I think the surprise of the day appears to be McLeod. He's now starting to harry Harvey, and he's uncharacteristically up the front and looking pretty strong.
Looking very definitely like a potential second place holder very shortly.
He may just have outguessed them, you know, in the condition. He may have maybe well be running a softer compound tyre, more of a tyre that he'd used to qualify yesterday, but he's looking very strong.
This lap from McLeod is going to be a big challenge, I suspect. A 20.07 that time for Johnson, knocking nearly a second off his time, averaging 144 kilometres an hour.
Meantime, Moffat dropping back a little bit behind Jim Richards under the bridge.
Alan Moffat historically tends to set his cars up very hard. He goes for very hard springs, and there's very little suspension movement in most of his cars looking back over the years. And in this type of slippery condition, that can be against him. So we may see him charge a little later as the track dries out more. On the other hand, McLeod tends to set his cars up reasonably softly, and he's taking some advantage of the condition.
Only 3.6 seconds covering first to third place. Johnson through John Harvey back to Peter McLeod. 3.6 seconds on lap 4. The BMW, Alan, has been a problem car for them this year, often having, well, always having a lot of squirt, but not necessarily the handling. But seeming to go well up here, qualified well and running quite well in the race so far.
Yes, it is. It's a motor car that also has been very, very hard on tyres. It uses tyres at quite a frightening rate because it doesn't handle that well.
3.08 seconds now between first and third. So that whole compression from Johnson, John Harvey back to Peter McLeod coming forward. So McLeod really making ground on the leaders.
And 6.42 seconds back to Alan Moffat behind Jim Richards.
And Dick Johnson dropping his lap time further to a 19.6. So he's taken 1.3 seconds off his time in 3 laps.
The other thing about a motor car that doesn't handle all that well is that in a condition like this, because it tends to edge its tyres, it can be very strong in a greasy condition. But if the edge comes off, I think we'll see Moffat probably go past.
Indeed, the BMW seems to do that and always seems very ready to let the tail go and to get fairly sideways.
Yes, and that's where the tyre wear comes in. It's also very savage on its front leading tyre.
But tremendously fast in a straight line.
Yes, it's a shame that it doesn't handle because it's got great power and it handles very well. I'm sorry, it sounds so well. It sounds like a racer. But there's Moffat giving him a real hard time now. And
now McLeod comes out of the slipstream and then drops back in behind Harvey. Took a tentative look outside, and Harvey had the legs on him down the straight.
Over the first 3, it's now 3.3 seconds. So Johnson pulling out just a touch, doing a lap of 19.4.
And the position after 5 laps, you see there, Dick Johnson leading from John Harvey, and Peter McLeod right behind Harvey and the Marlborough Holden dealer Tim Commodore. McLeod's gone to a dry sump system this weekend for the first time in the Mazda, giving him better oil cooling, but also giving him better weight distribution as well.
Yesterday it came unstuck when an external part of that system dropped all the oil under the Dunlop bridge, sent Jim Richards spearing off the track.
And there he goes.
As McLeod looks for an inside run on Harvey and ruined an engine. McLeod now back to the motor that he ran at Wanneroo, which is not as good as the one which he qualified with yesterday and which he hoped would get him down to around a 14.7 or 14.8. Ended up with a 15.1.
Look at the difference on the main straight between the Harvey Commodore and McLeod's Mazda. This time closer, got the draft, but the V8 Commodore has the legs down the straight.
And Johnson out to 3.88 over third placed McLeod. So McLeod and Harvey's relativity you can see is staying the same. It's Johnson pulling away from that pair, particularly as Harvey probably tries to cover himself a bit on McLeod.
Yes, there's no doubt the Mazda of McLeod certainly has the ability to outhandle the Commodore, but the Commodore just has the legs. And we can see a little rain starting to fall over the back. The windscreen wipers are on. Once again, this can change the complexion of the race. But the place to be is out in front. We're in a difficult condition like this, and that's where Dick Johnson is, and he's doing it well. There's almost a carbon copy behind this pair of Moffat and Richards, where once again Moffat is, there's McLeod. Now he's just probing, but you'll find that in this situation Johnny Harvey will be as hard to pass as a $3 note.
Johnson's time still getting better, although he's got his wipers on, a 19.11, an average speed of 145.8 kilometres an hour.
Yes, it's very difficult for us to realise how hard these blokes are working in these conditions. These motor cars all have plenty of power. The circuit is very greasy, and there's Harvey a little bit out of shape. And the circuit is very greasy, and all these guys are working very, very hard. I think it's apparent also that the Richards-Moffat dice is getting closer to Harvey McLeod.
Johnson continues just to pull a touch out to 4.07 seconds lead over third place McLeod. Harvey now well and truly, as you can see in the traffic, and it's going to help McLeod. Johnson a 19.15, virtually identical to the previous lap, to within 400ths.
And it's raining more heavily over the back.
Yes, and Richards is definitely closing on that pair, and he's taking Moffat with him. I think we're going to see a four-way dice here very soon. The other thing is that as these two blokes are blocking each other and driving quite close together and trying to pass, they tend to slow themselves, and the back two will be drawn up to them.
Has been glorious weather up at Surfers. Yesterday, an idyllic day. Warm, sunny, and the rain has only just closed in about an hour ago.
And no one's had the chance to test in the rain.
Well, I think if Dick Johnson was to write the script for this race, it's about exactly the way he'd write it. He's got a nice little buffer, and second, third and fourth are all closing up, and they're going to be worrying hell out of each other, which is going to make it good for Dick.
Giving you an idea of what's going on, Dick Johnson's gone out to a 20.5, his slowest lap bar one in terms of flying laps, and 1.4 seconds slower than the previous lap.
There's Richards had quite a big moment under the bridge. Moffat almost took advantage. In fact, he has taken advantage of that.
Yes, Alan Moffat is through Jim Richards.
That was one tiny slip. The car got sideways and he had to get off the gas, and Moffat took the advantage. An old pro like that, he only needs one little opening and he's through. But there's the power of the BM again, but I think you'll see Moffat clear away now and walk up to McLeod.
Positions further back in the field, behind Moffat and Richards. Steve Harrington closely dicing with Murray Carter. Then comes Warren Cullen, Steve Masterton, Andrew Harris and Graham Lusty.
I think we've seen the edge come off the tyres on the BMW now. It's not handling as well.
Onto the main straight. Dick Johnson lapping slower cars.
Gap, Johnson to third place, McLeod 2.7. Johnson's lap time a 20.53, identical to the 100th, the previous lap.
Half a second separating.
53 skating off. Chris Clearahan. That's Chris Clearahan, who leads the Australian Sports Car Championship in the ex-Peter McLeod 12A Wankel-engined Mazda.
Jim Richards looking decidedly dicey in the BMW, and there's the worried Alan Moffat team. Wet weather tyres at the ready. In a 25-lap race, a change to wet weather tyres would cost you almost a lap, maybe more.
I noticed just a little earlier they held out the big signal board to Moffat as well, and we didn't see the message side, but I can almost bet you that they've just put a big question mark and then wet tyres.
Alan Horsley there, the team manager, looking anxious, but knows the decision's in the hands of this man. 43-year-old Melbourne resident, 4 times winner of the Australian Touring Car Championship, 4 times winner at Bathurst, 3 times at Sandown, at the Castrol 400. The fastest lap in the race so far, Jim Richards, a 1:19.4. And 2.3 seconds separate the first 3 cars. The cars now on their 11th lap, having completed 10. Dick Johnson, this is 2/5 race distance, leads from still Harvey second, McLeod third, Moffat ready to attack McLeod.
Moffat was 1.9 seconds behind and suddenly just swooped in and closed that gap in half a lap.
So if McLeod doesn't do something positive on Harvey, Moffat will do it for him very shortly.
Yes, indeed. I think we shouldn't underestimate the drive of Peter McLeod as well. Moffat is the official Mazda man, and he's being led by a privateer, and he's doing a very, very good job.
That fastest lap I'd given you a Johnson at a 19.11. That's from the timekeepers, who say Richards so far, by their timing, has been fastest at 19.4.
McLeod now.
There's the freight train. It's John Harvey, Peter McLeod right behind him, and right behind again the current Australian touring car champion Alan Moffat. McLeod goes to the inside. Harvey cuts his nose off.
Well, McLeod now may be forced to take a little risk at getting past Harvey, because he knows he's going to be gobbled up very soon by Moffat. So maybe in this lap he may have to take just a bit of a risk, and even if he has to force his way past down the inside.
Gap from Dick Johnson back to Alan Moffat is 3.09 seconds. That covers the first 4 cars in the Australian touring car title.
With Johnson for 4 laps now, lapping at 20.4 around that area.
There goes McLeod down the inside. Has Harvey left the gap? Yes, he has. Moffat now nosing into Harvey.
Now the tactic for McLeod is to really put his head down and concentrate and try to get a little gap through the S's this time, so that Harvey can't get him down the straight.
Harvey having to noticeably back off for the left-hander, Alan.
Yes, indeed. The lighter cars certainly move through that corner better. And he's got a little break. He'll get... No, he just didn't quite get that lap car behind him. But now he's got to really put it together and get through the S's and with enough gap so that he can hold the superior power of the Commodore down the straight.
Down the straight last time, Dick Johnson was flashing his lights to slower cars, saying, "Look out, I'm coming through," and cannot lift off.
And Johnson just got a bad balk in the S's there, and I think McLeod's moved quite close to him. And then McLeod got the same balk on the last corner.
1.61 seconds separating first to second position, and then this guy's for 3rd place.
And McLeod has the gap. He's got enough of a gap to hold him down the straight.
2.2 separate the leading 4, Johnson, McLeod, Harvey, Moffat. And a 20.88 to Johnson as he goes out to what now becomes the slowest lap, bar 1. Fastest lap as I had about a 19.1 for Johnson. Dick, official from the timekeepers, 19.0. Average speed is nearly 146 kilometres an hour.
Here's Harvey probing at McLeod up the back straight. That was close. It was only that lap car, I think. That little Gemini that blocked Harvey there a little. He was having a real run at him up the back straight. This is where its concentration is at 100%, because it's getting more greasy over there. We can see spray coming off the tyres, Moffat probing away, but the slightest little slip on those greasy conditions and you may have slipped back 2 or 3 places.
Moffat looking underneath Harvey there, can't do it.
Alan, how good at driving is this from John Harvey, who had his last race at Bathurst, which of course he won with Larry Perkins and Peter Brock. His last race before that was perhaps Sandown and then Bathurst the year before. In other words, he does very little constant racing, and yet he's right on the pace.
Yes, indeed. And look at McLeod. He's slipping,
right
Johnson.
Yes. 1.82 seconds separates first to 4th position, and McLeod now right on Dick Johnson's tail.
Dick getting a bit sideways there too.
Yes, indeed.
Alan Moffat going underneath John Harvey coming down here.
Alan, a lot of people think that because the Mazda is light and nimble, Moffat threw on Harvey.
Yes.
Harvey 4th. A lot of people imagine because the Mazda is a small car that it's a good car in the rain, but in fact with a short wheelbase and not much weight to squeegee the water away, it can be pretty difficult to drive, and particularly with the engine characteristics it's got.
Yes, that's very true, but then that little rotary engine is still quite torquey, particularly the 13B, and that's helping them in the wet.
The compression over the first 4 drivers has gone from 3.14 2 laps ago to 1.95. Moffat elbows his way past the Mazda 323, which really on its pace shouldn't be in the race by my measure.
No, it's dangerous out there in those conditions and shouldn't be there. I think we're seeing the best drive of Peter McLeod's career. These conditions are very difficult. I just can't say that enough. And McLeod is now harrying Dick Johnson very much. He's moving on him, and Dick's car's sliding more, enabling him to pull inside. Unfortunately, he won't have the grunt.
Will he be brave enough to try and head him as they go under the bridge?
Won't even do it. He pulls back inside the slipstream of Dick Johnson.
And look at Moffat closing up as well. This is a great motor race.
1.74 seconds over the first 4, but a lot of that is in the gap from Moffat back to Harvey. The first 3 separated by only about a second.
And how would you like to be Peter McLeod now? He's disposed of Harvey. He did it very well. He's now got one of the old pros, Moffat, right behind him. He gives nobody an inch. And he's got Dick Johnson in front of him, who owns the biggest gate in the business.
To give you an idea on speeds, they've dropped 5 seconds in lap time, which is equivalent to about 12 or 13 kilometres an hour only. means life's still pretty exciting, Alan.
Well, even more so. You know, I'm sorry to push the point, but these guys are all doing a great job. Those conditions are very, very difficult.
14 laps covered. They're on their 15th. They're coming up to 3/5 race distance at the end of this lap. And look at the motor race that we have. And now we've got Jim Richards on the fastest lap by a mammoth amount, 18.3. 7/10 faster than Johnson on lap 7.
McLeod instantly out of the slipstream.
Visibility must be getting difficult too if you're that close behind on these conditions, Alan.
Yes, the power of that big Henry, though.
0.68 of a second only over 4 cars as they come up to 3/5 distance, complete 15 laps and start on their 16th. That's the situation, but it really doesn't tell how close and how exciting it is, and it gives us no idea of what will happen in the 10 remaining laps.
Jim Richards is 8.59 seconds behind in 5th position.
And McLeod forcing Johnson to a 19.8. His first lap in the 19s for 8 laps.
But don't anyone try and tell John Harvey that he's not in this race either.
That's right.
He had a good probe and a push at Moffat down the straight last time. In fact, Moffat had to slam the door as they went under the bridge. And I think John sitting back, he's pretty happy to beat it.
Yeah, I think he's very content. It's a typical sort of Harvey positioning, actually.
Yes.
He doesn't like to be up front necessarily with the pressure on. He's looking after the car and he's watching what everybody else is doing.
Yes, indeed. And the pressure's certainly on Dick at the moment. He's getting a little more untidy, but he's obviously pushing the car very hard.
I'd think John Harvey, as you say, Alan, would be looking at it and saying, this is just lovely. I'm in, keep touch with them, and I could win a motor race.
Now watch for a Moffat charge on McLeod this time. He's going to slip. Oh, and that lap car is a difficult one, but
Gary Wilmington.
Moffat may well pull out, but he can't. He's blocked.
And 0.88 seconds only over the first 4 and a half. Gary Wilmington who's hit Moffat. And can Moffat save the situation?
He's going for the tie barrier. He's over the top. He's gone over the tie barrier, over into the ditch.
There's Alan Moffat out of the motor race, hit by Gary Wilmington, the man he was lapping.
That's Johnny Harvey running up to him.
He's run out to help Moffat. Moffat groggy but standing, but John Harvey has stopped to help Moffat. Well, obviously he stopped because he's gone off the track.
He went off the road too, yes.
There's Harvey's car stuffed into a bank. This is how it happened. Wilmington, who I think you have to say, Alan Grice, did the wrong thing.
Yes, he did the wrong thing about halfway down the straight. He saw the leaders come up. He's a lapped car. He should have got the hell out of the road. The thing there, when the incident occurred, it's difficult because Moffat turned in front of him, but he made the mistake by not getting out of the road half the length of the straightaway.
And Moffat's so lucky that
that's the bank that Harvey hit to Moffat's right.
There's the race leader, Dick Johnson, down the straight. There'll be yellow flags under the bridge this time.
And the reason that we lost sight of that accident in the middle of it was that the cars took the camera cable out. It's 1.3 seconds now between first and second. Johnson back to Peter McLeod, and Johnson's just done a 19.7 second lap.
I cannot stress how lucky Alan Moffat is. Had his car gone another few feet, it would have been over the bank and down into a very deep embankment on the other side.
I think that we can't quite see the nose of it, but I think it's rather second-hand as well. But here's a typical example now of a bit of experience coming into it. There's been a major change in the race in that there's been that incident and that accident. It's taking Peter McLeod a little while to get his mind right back on the job, and Dick Johnson's got straight back into it and he's pulled a gap.
And the race is on lap 18. Johnson, the race leader from McLeod.
Coming up now to lap Andrew Harrison. In front of him is Steve Masterton.
Does the right thing, gets out of the road.
Harris, in fact, maturing very well. Harrison is maturing very well.
Yes, indeed. Now McLeod seems to have got his mind back on the job again, and he's picking him back up again. Yep.
Masterton beside Johnson, but Johnson just pulls away from Stephen Masterton.
1.3 seconds again between Johnson first, McLeod second.
McLeod backs off under the bridge.
Jim Richards third now in the BMW, goes across the line now, a further 10.2 seconds in arrears.
McLeod looking for a way down through Masterton and Harris. And Harris blocks him.
Yes.
He takes the opportunity to go through Masterton at the same time.
Back on the track is Chris Clearahan, incidentally, whom we saw spin earlier and run off in the Mazda RX-7 in the 53. So Jim Richards in the BMW is third.
McLeod still stuck behind Harris as they go into a Sander corner, the left-hander in the middle of the back straight.
Harrington is fourth, Cullen is fifth,
And Harris
Carter
is
is
still
sixth.
there. For goodness sake, get out of the way.
Well, this is a shame. McLeod was just starting to pick that up again. I hope that he can pick that gap back. I think he's running out of laps now. That one balk through several corners has been very, very difficult and very disadvantageous for him.
In the tyre situation, Alan, it's been interesting because in the last round there was an enormous number of cars on Avon, and Moffat's won 2 rounds on Avons. But in this round, very few are running on Avon, most on Dunlops.
In fact, McLeod is the only major competitor on Avon this time in the race.
Aha. Well, there you go. That's maybe explains why he was quicker than the other Dunlop shot competitors in that greasy condition. If he had a different tyre, it must have helped.
3.6 seconds is the gap from first to second position.
And 10.18 back to third place Jim Richards. A 19.77 lap to Johnson.
I notice a bit of flare missing. I think he may have lost a bit of flare on the other side of his car, the Slick 50 car, in trying to get past Harris.
Steve Harrington, Warren, Cullen, Murray, Carter in the minor placings behind the leading three of Johnson, McLeod and Richards. A lot of people, Alan, particularly even in advanced driving courses, which you're now getting involved in, talk of correcting slides and so on, but it was noticeable when Alan Moffat lost it there, he does what all experienced race drivers do, is they just clamp on the picks.
Yes, it's always the last card in the deck. When all else fails, lock them all up, and at least you're going to go into what you're going to hit a little slower.
McLeod takes almost more than half a second off Johnson on that lap, down to a gap of 2.48 seconds.
Yeah, it's good.
Johnson doing a 20.14 lap, and the gap to Richards going out to 12.9, so McLeod's pulling away from Richards.
Yeah, Richards
probably dropping from him as well.
His tyres would have gone by now.
Richards in third position. Lonely race for him now. Well and truly out of contention for the lead, and quite away, in fact half the track away from Stephen Harrington in fourth position. Behind him is Warren Cullen, and right behind him is Murray Carter in the other Mazda RX-7.
Third place Jim Richards, man with fastest race lap, 18.3, an average speed of about 146 kilometres an hour. Graham Lusty tucked in behind him, but down a lap, and look at Richards doing the wheel work.
Yes, the tyres are gone. He needs the grease nipples and the elbows at this stage of the game. He's doing a lot of handwork in that cockpit, and it's very difficult.
But he does a jolly good job, actually, of sorting out the problems with the car as Johnson goes by to complete lap 21, start on 22, 3 to go, and 2.48 seconds the gap from first to second. And we have to say that Johnson has played a remarkably cool hand. He's had a lot of pressure, yes, and helped by a little bit of luck, bad luck to other people. He's done a good job.
There was the car looking very wobbly under the bridge again. A very professional job from Dick, but it's not all over. If we've got enough laps, McLeod's still coming at him.
A win in this event will give Dick Johnson the lead in the Australian Touring Car title. Peter Brock, of course, not here. He's at Silverstone for the 6-hour race in his big Porsche Group C car in preparation for the Le Mans 24-hour races. Dick Johnson actually forced us off another competitor who went so far out of the way to give Johnson a clear track.
So Johnson coming around now to complete 22 2. Sorry, I said he had 3 remaining. He has 3 remaining now. And he has a very handy, and I'd call it a comfortable lead of 3.89 seconds over Peter McLeod, as he does a 19.23, coming down to one of his best lap times in the race, sitting on 145.5 kilometres an hour average.
Next round of the Australian Touring Car title is on at Oran Park in 2 weeks' time. The ABC, of course, will be covering it nationally, as indeed it is all the Australian Touring Car rounds this year. One of the competitors at Oran Park will be Alan Grice, back in the Commodore, with which he contested the first 2 rounds of the Australian title.
I noticed Dick pump his brakes going into that corner there. Apparently they're starting to give him just a little bit of bother, and he's just feeling for them with the left foot before he actually makes the brake application. But he's certainly starting to sit back in the cockpit, and he's doing it pretty well now.
I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to know about the man who's leading the championship up to this round. Dick Johnson will overtake him, and that's Peter Brock, who yesterday our time was practicing at Silverstone, has slotted himself 11th for the World Endurance Championship round there, the 1,000-kilometre race. Brock and Larry Perkins driving a Porsche 956. They're in front of last year's Le Mans winner, Vern Schuppen, who qualified 12th. Ricardo Patrese has taken pole position in a Lancia, some 5 seconds faster than Brock and Perkins' time. But Brock and Perkins tell us that they were using special qualifying engines, an engine turbo boost, and body work, wheels and tyres, and that they're very happy with the car, having qualified it in race condition. That race starts at midday today, so about 8 p.m. tonight our time. And of course is the lead up for them running at the Le Mans 24-hour race in mid-June.
One of the things that would have helped Dick a little today is that very greasy condition would have made his tyres last just a little bit longer.
Johnson and McLeod in first and second place. Richards is still third, but a real dice going on for fourth place. And that's between Warren Cullen, who's being caught, sorry, Steve Harrington, who's being caught by Warren Cullen, who's broken away from Murray Carter, who's 6th. Here they are, Harrington and Cullen's made a lot of ground on him in recent time as they thread their way through the field. This is 4th placed Harrington, the young Tasmanian, Alan Grice's teammate from last year.
Yes, he did quite well in that little exchange there. He got a lap car between him, and Cullen was looking a real threat, but he's pulled away now.
What was the number of that car dragging something on the left-hand side? 8, over.
Dick Johnson on his final lap for the last time round Qantas Hill. And really, by making an early break is what saved Dick Johnson. He got that buffer up when the pressure came on. Things worked his way. And he has not put a foot wrong. He's driven the car hard and tidily and will win the 4th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, completing lap 25.
Yes, a good professional job.
A margin of 3.47 seconds over second placed Mazda RX-7 number 50 of Peter McLeod, the driver from Wollongong. Third, but yet even to come onto the main straight, is Jim Richards in the JPS BMW 635, which appears now and has lost an enormous amount of ground in the last 5 or so laps. He has lost 12 or 15 seconds as he comes across the line now, 24.9 seconds in arrears to McLeod. So that's the result of the 4th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. The halfway point, 7 rounds actually, in the championship this year. And Dick Johnson now goes to the lead in the title chase. And Across the line goes Harrington, just holding out Warren Cullen for 4th place, Cullen 5th, and Murray Carter should take 6th. Dick Johnson's race time 33.28 minutes and an average speed of 143.3 kilometres an hour for the 80 kilometres.
And the points in the Australian Touring Car title after 4 rounds. Dick Johnson leads on 91 points from Peter Brock, second on 73. Peter McLeod moves to 3rd position on 57 points ahead of Jim Richards, 48, Warren Cullen, 47, and Alan Moffat slips from 3rd place to 6th on 45 points.
We have to thank Alan Grice too for coming up here and giving us the driver's eye viewpoint. As you said before the race started, Alan, we're going to drive a perfect race. We won't do much wrong sitting up here.
Yes,
but the boys out there have got some difficulties.
I had the right tyres on all day.
Well, thank you very much. We look forward to having you back at the next round, the 5th, as Dick Johnson pulls up, and in just a moment, John Smales will be down with him, who well and truly earned his victory and the lead in the championship, and he's a little bit happy, I think, Alan.
Oh, yes, he's done a good job.
And Peter McLeod will be very content too.
His best drive, yes.
Yep. Well done, Dick. Prior to this, in the championship, had 2 second places and a 3rd, so his first victory. Peter Brock having 2 victories, Alan Moffat the other 1. And now John Smales down there with him.
People in the last 2 days, myself included, who said you just didn't have the legs on Moffat.
Well, you know, as it be, the weather played a good part in the whole race, and thankfully the weather was like that, although it is very, very slippery, and we really sort of had a good race, so I'm just thankful. It's been a long time between drinks, really.
I think the whole crowd out here thought that was the best race you've driven for a long, long time.
Well, actually, I just sort of made up my mind that I wasn't sort of going to get disturbed or anything. I was just going to drive my own race and forget everyone who was there, and it worked really well.
When the pressure came on from McLeod, that was a bit unusual.
Yeah, I got a good run through the traffic. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a hold up in a couple of places, but that's the luck of the draw, I think, isn't it?
That situation under the bridge with Wilmington getting in the way of Moffat and causing the big lose of Moffat and Harvey, what did you see of it?
Actually, I saw nothing. When I got down to the next corner, I saw that no bugger was behind me, so I was wrapped, you know.
And you kept your foot into it, Dick, whereas McLeod seemed to fall off the pace because of that incident.
Well, I think you'll find McLeod ran intermediate tyres where I was on slicks, and these tyres are very, very slippery in the wet weather, and it started raining again, so he started catching up. But when the track started drying out a bit, I think his tyres went off, and he paid the penalty, really. But he drove an extremely good race.
Dick, you now lead the championship by more than 30 points from your next major competitor, meaning that Peter Brock is, of course, now out of the contention because he's overseas. What does it mean to you in the next 3 rounds?
Mate, that's about 100 points too short as far as I'm concerned. You know, we had the intention of winning the Touring Car Championship, and thanks to all the guys, because they've done a tremendous job, and all our sponsors, we've had a good run today, and I hope it just keeps going.
Dick Johnson, congratulations.
Thanks, John.
John Harvey, a pretty innocent victim in that incident in lap 17 of the Touring Car Championship.
Well, that's true. It was just one of those situations. I had a wall of cars in front of me, and on a slightly wet road, applying the brakes really meant nothing. I mean, I locked everything up, hit Wilmington, who was sideways anyway, and punted him clean off the road. But fortunately, from my point of view, in doing that, I knocked off a fair bit of speed by the time I hit the grass, and realised I was going to hit that earth bank that they've built over there. I had time to just give my shoulder strap one little tighten, because I knew I was going to hit, and I could have hit it at, say, 50 mile an hour or something head on. And during the time of sliding down the grass, I also had time to see Alan Moffat disappearing up the bank, and I could see that he was going to hit the tree, which he did. He hit it head on, and it did an awful lot of damage to the Mazda, and I was unhurt, obviously, so I was able to get to Alan and get him out of the car.
Did you reckon you were going to hurt yourself?
Didn't think so, no. I thought I had enough speed knocked off, and I could see that the bank is made of tyres, and so it would have some give in. It's not like hitting Armco, and that's about what happened.
And when you got to Alan Moffat, how was he?
Well, he was in slight shock, and he'd cut his chin and or nose, lips. He had a little bit of blood around there. Nothing real serious that I could see. He was complaining about his fingers. I'm not sure if he hurt his fingers, or they may have went off the steering wheel and hit the dashboard when he hit. But anyway, we relaxed him and kept him calm until the doctor arrived, and he took over from there.
And what did you do actually as you're approaching the barrier? You're hanging onto the wheel or what?
No, I just pulled my arms like that and pulled my head in, because I didn't want to hit and snap my neck, so I put my head down so that it didn't move far.
And how is Alan's car?
Oh, Alan's car is a write-off. I mean, not only has it bent the bodywork and the chassis, but we had a quick look under the bonnet up there, and it's broken the rotary engine, the crankcases are broken, the manifolds. I would say that transmission and is also damaged. It's a real mess.
What sort of speed do you think he'd have been doing when he actually hit the tree?
Well, I think he was doing about twice my speed because, as I said, I was able to watch him disappearing up the grass, and he didn't have the advantage that I had of hitting a car and knocking speed off. I mean, he had a slight touch with Wilmington, but when he went off the road onto the grass, he was nearly at full speed. And of course, on wet grass, there's no traction. You just don't slow down, you accelerate.
What speed would you have been doing then when you left the track?
Oh, it's a bit hard to say on a wet road. I think we must have been close on 100 miles an hour. Close to that, say 90 to 100, I'm not really sure, but it was very quick, I can assure you.
And how did you see the accident happening? Did you see actually Wilmington hit Moffat or Moffat go across him?
Look, it's a little unclear in my mind because things like that happen too quick. I can recall that we caught Wilmington, who was the slower car. Both Dick and Peter McLeod went round on the outside, as far as I can recall. Alan and I went to go on the inside of Wilmington, who then pulled down on his line or got stuck on the slippery drag racing solution on the track or whatever, lost it. Alan hit him, bounced off the inside wall, and then there was cars everywhere, and I hit Wilmington.
Well, if we have just a quick look at the car, how much work is there to get it to Oran Park in 2 weeks' time?
Oh, not a lot. I mean, it's superficial damage, really. It's body work, as you can see, but we've checked both the chassis rails are straight. The steering's okay. You know, they're very strong cars, and to have an impact like that and still be able to steer it, no problem. I mean, really, if we just put mudguards and bonnet on this car and a new grille, she's away. There's no mechanical damage, steering's fine.
Mick Webber's chief mechanic for the Moffat team. You've got a lot of work between now and Oran Park.
Yeah, we certainly have.
How bad is the car?
I'd say the car's a total write-off.
What did he hit?
Well, the car is now planted inside a tree.
We didn't see it on screen.
Well, the tree just looks like a big bush, but it's actually got a fairly large sort of lump of wood inside it, I can tell you.
Nonetheless, when you consider the alternative, that of going over the bank, maybe he was better off.
Well, I'm not quite so sure, because then it would have just launched Alan a bit further and would have probably nose-dived into the ground. As it is, Alan has taken... the tree basically looks like a bush, as I said, and it just looks now, the appearance of the car, you would imagine it's run into a brick wall.
What sort of damage is done to the car in the front end?
Well, all the front of the car has been concertinaed back nearly as far as the firewall. The engine, part of the engine's been broken off and the engine has been twisted around. The floor of the car's all been caved in, it's all concertinaed up. The driver's seat has been jammed up against the steering wheel.
The impact like that doesn't do a driver any good. How's Alan?
Well, Alan's pretty shaken up actually.
Any physical injury to him?
Well, Alan's got a broken bone in his finger. And he's got a slight cut in his chin and he's got severe pains in his chest. But he seems to be okay.
Well, on behalf of all motorsport enthusiasts in Australia, we certainly hope that Alan Moffat and the car are well on the road to recovery soon.
Thank you very much.
Just past the halfway point in the Australian Touring Car Championship, 4 rounds run of the 7 in total. The next one at Oran Park in 2 weeks' time, round 5. Hopefully...